Welcome to the Inspire to Invest podcast, where we're sharing stories from real estate investors and how investing has changed their lives. Thank you to PropertyCast.io for bringing you this month's episodes of Inspired to Invest. Hey everybody, welcome to the Inspire to Invest podcast. I'm pleased to introduce Danielle Chiasson, who is with us today. She is a serial entrepreneur, and she is best known for her work in residential redevelopment and rental housing in Ontario. She has a vast array of projects, ranging from light cleanups to full renovations with duplexes, triplex conversions, as well as multi-unit flips. And she's currently working on scaling her portfolio into even larger projects. She also loves to support entrepreneurs. So as you can see, she has a company called Strategic Success Consulting, as you can see by her backdrop behind her. And she also hosts monthly networking events for entrepreneurs and real estate investors. They offer an amazing platform to connect with industry experts, forge valuable connections, and also learn from others. Danielle is committed to inspiring, guiding, and empowering real estate investors and entrepreneurs on their journey to success. So thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
Oh, thank you for having me. It's truly an honor to have the invite and to come here and share with your audience. I'm doing well. Serena, how are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm hanging in there. There's obviously been lots of things going on in the last little while, but I do appreciate your time to be here today. And really to get started, obviously, it looks like you've amassed this big portfolio. You're doing all these big things, but I want to take it back to the very beginning so people can really understand where you came from and bridge the gap from like where you were to how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, well, how long do you have? Ultimately, like nobody comes out of high school or university and goes right into real estate unless maybe you have some family in it. It's typically for us, we go to school, we're told we need to choose a path before we really know what we want to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I ended up, so I grew up in New Brunswick and lived in Nova Scotia for a while. And I kind of jumped over the country and I went to Calgary, Alberta, and I lived out there for a decade and I worked in the service industry. I did go to university, ended up dropping out. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I think a lot of people can resonate with that. And especially when you come from humble beginnings. And back in my time, like going to university was a thing where poor people say, like, why are you going to go to university and start your life in debt, in massive debt? And so the mindset wasn't there to really understand the benefit of university and why you should do that and ways you can even minimize the financial impact. Like that just wasn't available to me because nobody in my family had done it. So I went, it was like right out of the gate, go work, get a job, get a place, did that, wasted, a decade of my life really in the service industry. Don't regret it because it was fun.
And it gives you the building blocks, right? So I think there's still value to all those experiences, even if it feels like you look back and it's a setback.
Well, I never look at it as a setback. Yeah, you're right. Some people could, but ultimately, it's the school of life and the experiences that I've had and the interactions with people. And as you know, Serena, I'm a people person. I'm all about people and connecting with people, understanding people. And so I really love understanding the psychology of what drives people.
Yeah.
And so so what happened in the interim, I ended up buying a house, bought two houses. So I bought my primary and my first investment home at the same time.
Yeah.
When I was 27. And then for a decade, I was a landlord. So I just say that's when I was an amateur investor. I really didn't know what I was doing. But because nobody in my life had rental properties, I thought I was on top of the world. Like I had it made, I had it figured out, right?
So how did that happen? Because the average home buyer isn't like, I'm going to go 2-for-1 shopping right now. So can you talk about how you did that both at the same time?
Yeah. So a little bit of creative work was there. I ended up with my best friend buying two houses. So she had the credit and I had the money. And so we came together and said, okay, you know what? And as we were shopping for one house, initially it was just going to be one house. I decided that I wanted two because I was thinking to myself, well, if something happens that it goes sour, I can't cut a house in half.
Yeah.
So if I have two houses, then it's easier to like, you take one, I take one. And we'll be shopping the same price point. So ultimately what happened is I had a mortgage broker and she was very creative. And I walked into her office. I remember her name was Debbie. And I'm like, Debbie, I need two. And at the time, as first-time home buyers, we could put 5% down.
Yeah.
And so and so I was like, well, she's a first-time home buyer and I'm a first-time home buyer. She's like, no, it only applies to one. I'm like, I don't know, figure it out. It's two or none. And so I really like put the heat on her. couple days later, she called me. She goes, Danielle, I got to figure it out. But these are the conditions you have to meet. We met those conditions. And we ultimately ended up kind of, I guess, house hacking without, like, before house hacking was a thing. So we kind of did conversions without before conversions was a thing. So we bought 2 bungalows that had doors in the back that went straight into the unit. So it's kind of like the back door would be a split. You can go up into the upper unit or down into the lower unit.
Yeah.
And and so that's how we ended up doing. So ultimately we ended up splitting the 2 houses into 4 units. We lived in the upper floor of 1. We rented out the other 3, and that's how I got into the game. So I think the number one quality of an entrepreneur, and if you're listening out there and you're a curious type, you have the main ingredient of being an entrepreneur, which is getting curious, asking questions, and not being afraid to kind of step outside the box. And that's what I did. Yeah.
So then what was the catalyst to turn this into an actual career? So you started with those 2 properties, and then where did you take things to this scale that you're at in terms of having like flips and duplexes and triplexes and all of that?
Yeah. So during that time, I was starting to build a life with my former life partner, and he was a contractor. And so I ended up working, making babies and working for him in his office. And obviously he was an entrepreneur. He had a successful business. I was in the office. I ended up going in there, rearranging a bunch of things and helping him scale his business, and just working with contractors every day. That was just my life, and having kind of a taste for real estate. And I was buying properties at that point, but just as a landlord. So that was the first 2 that we had. And then ended up buying some more, just again, as a landlord. And, you make mistakes as a landlord. You don't know what you're doing. Right. And so ultimately it was like, oh, I'm not going to increase the rent because they're great tenants. I don't want to scare them off. Right. And then all of a sudden you realize, like, 5 years later, there's a huge rent spread between their rent and market rent. And you're like, oh no, what do I do now? Right.
Yeah.
So, it was good to learn. But then you fast forward a decade, and I ended up going to a conference down in the States and attaching myself to a group down there. And it was in 2013 when I started educating myself on flipping houses, running a business, flipping houses, wholesaling, all of the different strategies that we now know were just not even in Canada, like known in Canada yet, mainstream. And learned all of that and just started applying it. So that was when I went from an amateur investor to a sophisticated investor, or a landlord to investor.
And was that the time that you kind of transitioned into it full time?
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. So in 2013, that's when I realized, like, I had taken my partner's business as far as, it could go. And I just love always seeing, progress and changes. And he had kind of scaled it up to where he was comfortable, and now it was kind of boring. So I started venturing out into my own and saying, okay, what else could I do? So that's when I started flipping houses. Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that experience when you're flipping houses and growing your portfolio? Like, what would you say are some of the lessons that came along with that, and any challenges that you experienced as you were, really starting to focus on it full time?
Listen to your coach. That was the first thing, honestly. So I went 2 years. I was in conference rooms and learning and starting to build the foundation of my business. I got my business incorporated, got the name and business cards back then, and website and all that stuff. So then, so when I decided to actually start implementing, I ended up buying, and my coaches had told me, if you're going to flip, if you have an active business and you're flipping, you want to pick a market or property that's within 30-minute radius of your home, or your home base, where you are mostly. And so I'm in Milton, Ontario, and my first flip was in Port Hope, Ontario, which is 2.5 hours.
Yeah, so, those are 2 totally opposite ends of the GTA.
Which is, I have to go on the other side of Toronto. So it's not even just a 2.5 hour drive, but it's on the other side of the city of Toronto, which is like to get on the other side of the city of LA and get through that traffic. So so it was quite interesting. And not only that, all my contacts were here locally in the contractor world. So now I had to build and vet new contractors and work with contractors I didn't know. And anyhow, so it was, and then my second one, by the way, I bought that one in September, and then in October, a month later, I got my second flip, which was in Sarnia, which is 2 hours in the opposite direction of that. So the 2 flips that I was running concurrently were 5 minutes apart. So it was, Yeah, it was a bit of a learning lesson. And then I realized, I'm like, okay, you know what? Maybe I'll just pick a market that's a little closer to home. So let me see
Yeah.
what's around here. So yeah, so listen to your coach. I mean, that was the one that always stood out the most for me because it was the
Yeah.
most impactful. But yeah, every time they tried telling me something and I kind of deviated, I kind of had to learn the hard way, of some of us do.
And
And
those were different back then, right? Like I think nowadays it's maybe a little bit easier to be remote because there are things like, you could FaceTime with your contractor, they can show you what they're doing. But back then you would have to trust what they're doing. And obviously there are possible things that can come out from that if you're not able to
or
really
not
manage your projects, right? So
Yeah, or not trust, because we didn't
yeah,
even have like cameras on your phones were just not
yeah,
a thing. I mean, even now, to try to get a contractor to take pictures of a job can sometimes be challenging if you have an old school contractor.
yeah, yeah,
Or they just have a phone that just doesn't have the great picture. They don't know how to send it, and then they're like, "Oh, I need Wi-Fi. I don't have Wi-Fi, and I don't have the data on my phone." So
yeah,
like, there's still challenges with that. Back
yeah,
then, we didn't even have that as an option. So no, I definitely had to be on site. I wanted to be too, though. And here's the other thing that I'll tell people: like, if you're going to go into doing this and you're going to be active, like one of the biggest mistakes that people do when they get into real estate, they hire a contractor and they just assume, and not just contractors, guys. So I'm not just knocking contractors, any professional, you just assume that they're going to do their job. But you, as the business owner, have to manage that. You have to set
yeah,
expectations, you have to manage it, follow up, and always hold people accountable to what they say
yeah,
they're going to do. And so a lot of people, that's just me by nature because I have my hands in everything. But
yeah,
with our students, I'm always seeing, students that just, they have a job and they're short on time. I'm like, listen, you got to send messages. Tell them you want those pictures. Like, don't just say send the pictures. They don't
yeah,
let it drop. We're Canadians, we're nice. We don't want to be pushy, but
yeah.
ultimately you're the one that's going to protect your business like no one else will, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I went through that when I was renovating an office that we were told we had to build these new doors. So they were to code and stuff like that. And our whole renovation got paused for 2.5 months. And then when the guys were there, they were just like, I was there kind of painting at the same time and they were taking like half an hour smoke breaks, 2.5 hour lunch breaks, like hand sanding. And I was like, what's happening?
Yeah.
And the only thing that saved us is that the closing on our first office actually fell through. So it gave us an extra 2 weeks to renovate. Otherwise, there's no chance we would have been in. And even in that last week, I sent my husband, I'm like, you have to help get this done.
Yeah.
So he was just talking about how, yeah, they were managing stuff, but the reality was the problem was they weren't being managed. So you have these young kids that technically are under the licensed contractor, but the guy that runs the business is never coming. So that's how all these things were kind of falling behind and all of that, right? So I think you really have to be, an ambassador for yourself and look out for yourself in any situation, but there's got to be some quality controls in place.
Absolutely. And there's things that you can do. Like I said, get them to send pictures every day.
Yeah.
One of the things so I'll give you some tips that I've done when I was managing my own projects. So obviously they have to send the pictures at the end of every week to show the progress.
Yeah.
When I highly recommend when you're first doing, if it's your first flip or your first big project,
Yeah.
go there every day. Here's the tip though. Don't tell them you're coming and don't tell them when you're coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then that way you're keeping them guessing. They're like, okay, sometimes she shows up at 8 o'clock. Sometimes she comes at 3:30. Sometimes she comes at 1. So
Yeah.
like, you just need to know that they're on site, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're unable to do that, you can put cameras on site. And then that way you can see when they're coming and going. Just the fact that the cameras are there is that you tell the contractors, look, I'm putting these cameras. It's for security reasons. It's going to keep your tools safe. I just want to make sure everything's kosher.
Yeah.
And that's it. But they know that you're watching.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because then you're like,
so
hey, are you guys showing up today? You're calling at 9:30. And they're like, oh, yeah, we're coming. Right.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
do that once or twice, and then they know you're watching these cameras.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's one way to do it remotely. And the other thing that I used to do is, so contractors are notorious. Subpar contractors are notorious for going and getting some stuff at 11 o'clock in the morning from Home Depot or Rona.
Yeah.
And like, oh, they need materials. And so I had my guys trained. So I actually hired guys and I just managed my own crew eventually. But ultimately, when you're working with contractors and they're leaving the job,
Yeah.
tell them no. When you come on site, you're on site. At the end of the day, you know what you need for tomorrow. You make a tally of what you need for tomorrow. Either leave an hour early and head up the hardware store on your way home.
Yeah.
Or pick it up on your way to work in the morning. but there's absolutely no need for you to be running out and getting a couple of 2x4s in the middle of the day. There's just none. And so, so that's a big thing. Like when they're doing it daily, it's a problem. And having those cameras there help, or just showing up helps. So one of the big things for me, I loved showing up midday or around 3:30, because they're notorious for leaving early, and they're notorious for getting materials in the middle of the day. So like late morning, midday. So that's, and you have to manage them. And it's not just contractors. I mean, we're talking about contractors, but your realtor, I mean, I've had my realtor that I've worked with for years. I mean, he could tell you stories. He's like, man, don't upset Danielle. Like, just don't. Like, just do what she needs, and that's it. Because I hold him accountable for all the things that he said he was going to do. Now, he was a really great realtor, but they're busy. People are busy. And so you just need to make sure that you're top of mind, front and center when they're doing their everyday stuff. Otherwise, if you're just not there and present in their life, then you're not going to be their priority.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And on that note, we're just going to take a really brief break for a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. Is the real estate investment you're considering a gold mine or a landmine? Introducing PropertyCast.io, the black magic of real estate investment analysis. Use PropertyCast.io to analyze and underwrite real estate investment opportunities, unlock the potential of a property, and share professional reports. Jordan McGregor is a commercial realtor and founder of PropertyCast.io. He identified the need to simplify and streamline how properties are underwritten to help investors make better decisions and sound investments. PropertyCast.io is a best-in-class purpose-built tool for real estate investment analysis. To find out more, go to PropertyCast.io, and to sign up, click the link in the show notes. I value transparency, integrity, and trust. If you choose to work with me, you can be assured that business will be conducted honestly and openly. Time is of the essence in this industry, so you can expect nothing short of quick, clear communication from me. I'll keep you informed every step of the way so you feel comfortable throughout this entire process. Our homes are where we eat, sleep, relax, and play. My clients' best interests are at the heart of everything I do. And with this said, my service to you doesn't end when the transaction does. As your realtor, I'll not only help you buy and sell your property, I'll also educate and support you along the way. I want to help you fulfill your goal of home ownership and become your trusted real estate resource for life. I can't wait to share my passion for real estate with you. More importantly, to find you the perfect house to turn into your home. Looking to buy, sell, or invest in Durham Region or Toronto? Let's chat. Inspired to Invest is proud to support the Beyond Success program. In today's complex world, it's absolutely crucial for our youth to learn how to take charge of their financial future. We believe that every young person deserves access to accurate, practical financial information. Designed to bridge the gap, the Beyond Success program leverages a comprehensive educational bootcamp to equip young minds with essential financial literacy skills. At Beyond Success, it's not just about teaching financial literacy, it's also about fostering a foundation for a prosperous and empowered future. Join us. Together we can build a brighter financial future for the next generations. Join us. Together we can build a brighter financial future for the next generations. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Inspired to Invest podcast. I have Danielle Chiasson here with me today. She's talking about how she got involved in real estate way back when, and starting with flips and managing contractors and all those good things. Now, one of the things that I really want to know is, what would you say is one of the craziest things that's ever happened to you as a real estate investor?
Oof. Craziest things. That's a great question. I mean, there's a lot of stories. I'm not going to lie. There's a lot of stories. More recently, I had an 8-unit building that I was emptying out, and we were able to, it was like really dilapidated. It was in needed a lot of work. But one guy decided he didn't want to leave, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that, but he wasn't paying rent. So of course we went through the LTV process, filed the paperwork, doing everything right. Yeah. But now we had an empty building and he was alone in that building. And the funny thing is, and this is what I tell people, the problem with our system is that when people stop paying rent, then they start feeling that that's their place. because when somebody's giving rent, when they're handing rent every month, there's that psychological, again, remember how I said I like the psychology behind things, right? There's that psychological trigger that's like, oh yes, I'm paying for the use of this property. This is not my property. But when that is not happening anymore, they just feel ownership.
Entitled.
Not even entitled. They feel ownership. So anyway, this guy, he had a paper route, and he had a lot of papers that he didn't deliver. He kind of built up this little fort in the front of the building, had a massive like a cardboard box that he opened up, and he wrote on it, "This is my property, no trespassing." And I'm like, I don't understand. I can't even wrap my head around that. Like, how can you? I just can't wrap my head around that. So yeah, so that was interesting. We had 6 uniformed officers eventually to get him out. And yeah, he left a bunch of stuff too. So when we finally got the contractors in there, we had the bin there. And of course, we're emptying out everything by rights. And, he had a certain timeline to come and get his stuff. He never did. And now we're throwing stuff in the bin. And I guess he must have been walking by. He starts freaking out. That's my stuff. And climbs in the garbage bin. And he's starting to pull out his stuff. And it's just like one of those. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stories that I could tell you. But as an investor, one of the ones that was, and here's what I'll tell you, because there's a lot of people right now that are going through pain. They're going through some hardships. They're going through a really tough time. Here's what I'm going to tell you. So I had a time where I had a property under contract, and 2 days before, a day and a half before closing, I say it was 2 days before, but really I only had like a business day and a half-ish.
Yeah.
My investor pulled out. And so, because I was doing this with private money.
Yeah.
So now I had my deposit on the hook. I had all kinds of things like that was at risk here. And I was away. I was at a conference. And now I was struggling. Now all of a sudden I'm like panicking to make that work. And what I'm going to tell you is like, real estate is not sexy. Real estate is work. It's hard.
Yeah.
And it can be very painful at times. And people are not ready for that. They're just not ready for that. But ultimately, you have to build resiliency and get into a mindset that as an entrepreneur, and this is any entrepreneur, by the way, your job is to put out fires and to coordinate everything. But when there's a fire, you're the one that's got to put it out. You're the one, like when my contractors have a problem, I'm not dealing with it. They're coming to me and crying about it, and I have to deal with it and find a solution for them. And so I have that problem. And what I will say is for everybody, and the reason why I want to share this story is because anybody who's dealing with any hard times right now, just know that when you get to the other side, it makes you stronger and better to keep moving forward. And because it pushes these tough times, push you to learn things that you would never learn without going through these experiences.
Yeah, so that doesn't mean that things weren't hard in different ways. I think just, this is probably the first real market downturn we've had in 15 years. And I think a lot of people weren't prepared for things in this respect, right? So I think there's something to be said for just always preparing for the unexpected and just always have it like a plan B, a plan C, and all those different things. Now, obviously you have achieved a lot. What would you say is something that you're most proud of?
Oh, what am I most proud of? Like, honestly, I am most proud of like when I was doing flips, and truthfully, I burnt out because it's a lot of work. But I really loved like when you take a property that is in such disrepair, and I used to take like really, I would take on, my realtor was like, you have bigger balls than any investor that I know. And I'm like, why? And he's like, because you're taking on all the projects that even like
nobody would look at.
Yeah. And so you take those projects and you turn them into this, it's like a transformation, right? And it's like a work of art almost. But then you have the neighborhood, all of the neighbors, they're like just super grateful for somebody doing something with this property that was just severely neglected, right? And they're also grateful because what you're doing is you're helping maintain the value of the neighborhood. You're helping clean up the neighborhood, maintain the value of the neighborhood, keeping the integrity of the neighborhood, and then you're providing housing for people that need it. And we all know housing is an issue right now, right?
And I'm glad you're saying that, because I feel like sometimes landlords get a bad rap, right? Like the greedy landlord or the slumlord. But I think there are obviously the people bringing that value, right? And they're improving the community and the neighborhood. So I think that's really important to reflect back on. Now, in terms of how real estate has changed your life, do you feel like you've reached your financial freedom number? Like, are you happy sharing what that is or what it means to you? Maybe you can shed some light on that.
So the funny thing about that is that it's always a moving target, right? So people are like goals, goals, goals. And it's like, yeah, you set a goal, but the goals are a moving target and they ought to
Yeah.
be because that's where you're always growing. If it's not a moving target, you're going to reach it and then you're just going to be like a flower and wilt away because now you have
Yeah.
no purpose and nothing to drive you. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I'll share my number. My number is 20 million. No, I've not hit it. And it's a big number. I get that. Once I hit the 20 million, it might go to 50 at that
Yeah.
point. But
That's what motivates you, right? Like I think people need to have something to aim for. It's the same way like going on vacation and then you come home, you want to plan another vacation. You always kind of want something to look forward to or something to aspire to, right? So I understand exactly what you're saying.
yeah, and it's ultimately it's something that okay, so you said it kind of motivates me. Money doesn't motivate me, but the journey does
Yeah.
because on the journey I'm always helping like and so for me like I love what I do and I think that just shows in the passion and everything that I do but being able to pick up some people along the way and bring them on that journey and when you're sharing that journey with other people who are also as passionate and excited as you are it just I don't know it just makes life good. Now don't get me wrong, it's a grind. There's days
Yeah.
when you're like, wow, what am I doing this for? And oh my God, like I could just, why? I could, why?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there's days where I've had days where I just don't even want to get out of bed, you
Yeah.
know, on certain, you know, whatever, for whatever reason. But we have highs and we have lows. And
Yeah.
you have to embrace the lows because without the lows, you can't appreciate the highs.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's how it works. I mean, imagine if you're on a high all the time, essentially you would just be flat. How would you
Yeah.
even know you're on a high? So
Yeah.
you just
You're just on a plateau. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Now, in terms of the projects that you're working towards, I know when we read your bio, like you talked about that you are looking to shift into some bigger projects. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what's next for you.
yeah, so right now, talking about monster projects, probably one of the biggest projects is building strategic success and the
Yeah.
platform behind it. So, strategic success, a lot of people have asked me, what is it right now? Like, strategic success, it's content for other real estate investors and entrepreneurs. And essentially, it's just to help empower people in their lives on their journey to help make smart decisions.
Yeah.
So, the content is the heart of strategic success and the community but ultimately, what we do is we do coaching. We have 3 different tiered programs in the coaching. We run events, and that's to give back to our community so our community can stay strong.
Yeah.
We're now doing give back programs. So financial literacy for youth is something that I'm very passionate about. And so now we're partnering with someone else and now we're facilitating that. So
Yeah.
we're hosting, sorry, I should say hosting it. We're hosting it and they're facilitating it in partnership. So we're running that first event in May. And I'm very excited about that. So and that's just part of our give back.
Yeah.
And but building all of this and like as you know, Serena, I'm a systems girl, building the systems behind all of this and having the
Yeah.
people behind it. There's only so much you can do as an individual. You do need a team in order to grow and scale. And that's what I'm working on right now. So as I'm doing that, I'm really not doing much. I'm very quiet in the real estate side because
Yeah.
I want to set up the business to be able to run itself,
Yeah.
then go back into real estate. Now, when we go back into real estate, start focusing on real estate again, I'm going to be looking at doing purpose-built multis for a number of reasons. But now, like as you go on your real estate journey, you tend to level up. You start in this strategy and then you're like, oh, but now I can do this because you
Yeah.
gain skills along the way and then you
Yeah.
just kind of level up. And so
Yeah.
this is going to be a big level up move for me.
Yeah. And also just to your point, like it's not always just about the skills, it's also what's needed in the industry right now, right? So what kind of things are there incentives? You know, obviously affordable housing is a big thing. So you shift your focus, yes, based on your skills, but you know, where is there demand for where you can provide value, right? Um,
Absolutely.
Now, obviously, the name of this podcast is Inspired to Invest. So I always like to ask people, what's an inspiring quote that resonates with them or motivates them?
Well, I guess for those of you who've heard me talk, you know that I'm a perfectionist, and a lot of entrepreneurs are because a lot of us are alpha. We're hard on ourselves. We want to do the best in everything that we do,
Yeah.
and so I've had to kind of work that out of my system. And in fact, when I was flipping my flipping company is called Perfect Property. And that was just to highlight because I wanted something of my personality in the name. And, flipping houses, taking them dilapidated, making them beautiful. It was kind of, that name, that word perfect seemed to fit. And it's funny because after I created the business and then I started flipping, and then I had to start getting out of that perfect mode because if you try to make a house perfect, it's never going to
finish. Yeah.
right. Yeah. So one of my coaches had said, Danielle, done is better than perfect. And I just started running with that. So now, I'm still a perfectionist, but my partner has expanded on done is better than perfect. We were having a conversation about the whole thing because I still am uncomfortable with just getting things done because it doesn't really sit well with me.
Yeah.
But it's done is better than perfect in the pursuit of perfection.
Yeah.
And so again, coming back to like your goals are always changing. Well, so are when you have a goal of finishing a house or you have a goal of building a business, that's always a moving target too. So you're never going to get things perfect because you're going to want things to change as you start evolving into something else. And so it's always in the pursuit of perfection, but perfection is always a moving target, just like a goal.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Now, for anyone that wants to connect with you, what is the best way for them to find you, whether it's on social or your website?
Yeah, so on socials, I'm very active on Instagram. And if you click on my bio in Instagram, you can get a 15-minute discovery call with me. I'm happy to help you with anything that you're working on. But also in my bio is all our events. And you can shoot me a DM. I mean, if you don't want to jump on some people aren't comfortable with a video call, you can just shoot me a DM and we can text back and forth. But if there's anything I can help you with, that's probably the easiest way. Or you can also check out the website, which is strategicsuccessconsulting.com. Perfect. And what I love about the website is there's a lot of free content on the website. So you can just go there and just start looking at some of the content, start consuming that content, and hopefully it'll help you on your journey.
Great. I love that value first approach. We'll include all the information in the show notes below. Thank you for your time today. And of course, for anyone that is watching, thank you for your time. Make sure that you have followed along on social at Inspired to Invest podcast. And remember, above all else, when you invest in yourself, the sky's the limit. Thanks again. Thank you to PropertyCast.io for bringing you this month's episodes of Inspired to Invest. The views represented on this podcast are for general information only and does not constitute investment or other professional advice or an offering of securities. The host and guests featured on Inspired to Invest make no representations as to the performance of any particular investment. Should you decide to make an investment, you are responsible for conducting your own review and analysis. It is recommended that you obtain independent legal, accounting, and tax advice from licensed professionals.